So we're moving on to our fourth session, and this is track 1 again for big data and analytics. And over there in track 2, we'll have the payments panel. So moving right along, the panel on big data and analytics focuses on the use and importance of tracking and understanding customer data. And we'll discuss the key trends and challenges in this segment and its rising importance to e-tailers. I'll request the speakers to please make their way on stage. We have Kedar Gavane from Comscore. We have Shantanu Dutt from Amazon. We have Reshma Nagpal from DVS. And we have DJ from Ixtala. And the moderator for this session will be Ankur Bisen from Technopak. So, ladies and gentlemen who are here, please put your hands together to welcome our panel and our moderators. Right, so Ankur, I'll pass it on to you then.
Good evening, audience. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have a session on big data analytics for the next 45 minutes. What we're going to do is we were internally discussing, probably we bring this topic in the context of Indian retailing and Indian online e-tailing environment and see how India is ready, how is the ecosystem evolving, what is the receptivity of big data analytics in India, and some challenges and issues that is there for big data analytics as a topic. So I'll start straight away, just shooting this question of how big data analytics is defined today in the Indian context. And Kedar, you can take this.
Well, in the last couple of years, the computing power has really grown exponentially. And the cost of storing data or even manipulating or processing data has gone down. As a result, there's a lot of data collection that has happened across all the categories and more so in e-commerce. To give you a stat, 92% of the data collected till date has been created over the last 2 years, which means to say that there are more and more attributes or data points being created across various categories, and it becomes increasingly difficult to process or draw insights out of it, and hence the whole idea of big data has come in.
Yeah, so as Kedar rightly said, to continue on that point, it's what has changed in the last 10 years or so, right? What has changed from the traditional BI processing or ERP systems to big data is the volume, velocity, and variety of data, right? That has changed because of the explosion of the internet, right? If you are a person shopping on the internet today on an e-commerce site, right? For an e-commerce company to find out what is their highest selling product is very easy. That's structured data within the organization. But how about finding out what is the sentiment of people buying that product across the globe, right? That's what means going out to the Twitters and the Facebooks and the other social medias of the world, getting your sensors out, collecting that information, and then kind of processing that to bring out intelligence, right? And that requires huge amount of intelligence in terms of placing your sensors the right way, a lot of storage, and then bringing out some form of intelligence after that processing. Building recommendation engines is something that we see a lot of e-commerce companies in the process of doing or getting into it. Globally, this has been the trend. I was reading somewhere, this is not an official statistic, but I was reading somewhere the other day that Amazon.com's recommendation engine results in 31% of their entire selling, right? So out of what they sell, 31% comes from the recommendation engine, right? And this is based on predictive analysis. So you basically take users' clickstream data, mine it, and then right from what a user types when he searches, doing a predictive analysis of what he's trying to search, just like when you do on google.com, if you misspelled a word, there are options that come up saying what you mean, right? Right from there, right from defining the process there, to kind of displaying what kind of catalog this user could have based on his experience on other online portals, social media or e-commerce, or based on his history on the same e-commerce site, is what is kind of driving e-commerce platforms to kind of increase their sales. So.
Basu?
Hi. I would actually like to take a different view on what big data means for the Indian audience today. So many of us here are small and medium retailers, kind of. So for us, the number of transactions we would do in a day is like 1,000, 2,000 at the max, or maybe it'll go up to 5,000, 6,000. So that's not really big data. So at this point of time, do we need big data in India? Is big data kind of analytics in India is a question that I have on mind. That's one. Second is that, yeah, we are not big today, but someday we're going to reach there. We're going to do like lakhs of transactions, millions of transactions a day. So we need to be prepared for. We need to prepare our data today so that when we reach there, we're able to extract insights out of the data that we are collecting. For example, if you look at product data today, most of the e-commerce systems, they collect very less product attribute data. For example, if you're looking at a T-shirt has got a collar size, it's got color style, it's got designs on its written across its body. A lot of that information is not collected. So if tomorrow you want to predict what's the latest style going to be on site, what kind of stuff is selling on the, what kind of color is selling on the site. If you haven't captured that attribute data, it's not going to work out for you. You might have a lot of data sitting with you on your database, but frankly speaking, it's all unstructured data. If it's unstructured, you're not going to be able to make any meaningful insight of the data. So yeah, we do not have big data today. The volume of data is not as large as what you have in the US and all, but we need to prepare ourselves. We might be small today, but at the same time, we've got to ensure that we're collecting the right kind of data and we're collecting it well, so that when tomorrow we actually become big on data, we can actually make meaningful insights out of the data that we have collected.
So I would say whether we are considering ourselves big, small, medium, as a business owner or as a retailer who's taken the business online, a fundamental mindset shift has to be in place. You have to be ready to handle the data that's going to come in about your consumers. So we could split this into 4 areas. Firstly, how is the customer coming to my site? Are we mapping the avenues and taking action upon the data to improve the way the customer is accessing our website? Secondly, when they're on our site, how are they navigating through the site? Which page does my customer prefer? Where are they tending to go? What are they clicking on most? Capturing that data to then analyze and take actionable steps on increasing the turnover rate from a customer who's landing on the page. Thirdly, what are they buying? What are the preferences from my single customer? Is there a particular color, a particular item, a particular size, a particular type? Capturing those data to again use it later in a meaningful manner. And fourthly, when I then talk about the brand online, am I capturing what's being said in the social medias, scrubbing it and bringing it back to use it in a meaningful way? So I think the end result means first shift your mindset to be able to handle what data can actually do for you as a business, and then fix a strategy to actually tap all the touch points for your consumer and be ready not just to, you have to look at it in 3 steps. First, you've got to gather the data. Then you have to consolidate the data. And then you have to make it meaningful to take actionable steps. So I think if your strategy and your mindset is fixed at the start, you can make data phenomenally meaningful, which I think we all agree on.
There are 3 interesting points that came out. You mentioned that the data that is there right now, 92% of the data got created in the last 2 years. You made a point that, Basu, that right now the volume of data is low for big data analytics to sort of play out. And you brought in the point of mindset. My question is India ready for big data analytics as a game? Or are we too early to attempt this as an issue while we are sort of addressing many other issues in the evolution of retail in India?
Let me put the perspective in an e-commerce scenario. So for any typical e-commerce site, there are probably 4 pages. There's a home page, there's a catalog page, there's a product page, and there's a checkout page. Now, how much data can you collect? But the consumer is seeing thousands of products just between these 4 pages. Now, if you take 100 consumers and see that which were the top 10 products clicked or seen, you have another data point. So data in terms of transactions may not be, is not the meaning of how small or big your data is. If you add more connection points to it, that how many attributes are you collecting for the consumer? Are you collecting email ID, age, household income, how many kids does he have TV, does he watch, does he watch a particular channel, etc., etc. You will have so many connections to look at. your data will grow in exponential terms. It will be a factorial of the parameters that you're collecting. So it's all about how you can make it actionable. Are you going to say that next time a person who's watching a How I Met Your Mother has said that, I'm going to show him these exact 5 products and my conversion is going to be 10%? Fantastic. That's a decision point you've arrived at by collecting all these data points that you just mentioned. So whether, I think as Reshma mentioned, you have to prepare yourself. You have to list down all those parameters which you may not use right now as an actionable item, but list all of them down, get it collected from your consumer through their process of browsing through your website, and only then you can make it actionable later.
So there's another point. So today, assume that you're running a SQL database, right? So your data is stored in a SQL database. You have data coming from Google Analytics and all. So long as you're able to process your data by running queries on a SQL and putting it in an Excel file and processing data, you do not need big data. So if you're able to do it. So if the data volume of data goes beyond that, you're not able to run a SQL query and it's in multiple disparate places, that's when big data really comes in.
Coming back to the issue of mindset, typically we see a resistance from the consumers of big data analytics companies or e-tailers or retailers. They normally view data as a data set in an Excel sheet. I think the same transition would have happened in mature retail environments like a US or a Europe. And they would have answered this question, let's say 10, 15 years ago. What tipping point happened for this transition to happen in those countries? And when can we see that tipping point to happen for this mindset to change, where data starts to get viewed as an asset and not as a data in India? So you may like to bring your sort of experience in Amazon and...
Yeah, so it's interesting. Difficult to say when the tipping point was reached, but I guess especially to the Amazon case, it just started off very, very early, right? Back in 94, 95, when internet itself was kind of evolving, and Amazon came up with this concept of e-commerce with books, and then online store with other catalogs, and then now into cloud computing, which is basically taking their expertise of doing big data analytics on a particular set of infrastructure, and then kind of outsourcing the infrastructure in a public cloud model. I guess it's beyond a point a case of innovating and knowing what you need, rather than, I mean, you could sit down and think whether India is ready for big data or not, but it's more important as to how you can actually innovate on your website and think of how you do that. Whether the volumes of data are big or not, whether you call it big data or not, it doesn't matter, right? It's the analytics and the business value that you get out of it. Just to give you a small example, this is a global example in the US, but it's an e-commerce kind of retail store which is possibly not so big, right? It's much, much smaller, comparable to some of the e-commerce shops that we have in India. It's called Etsy, E-T-S-Y, right? What Etsy does is, it's got this huge catalog of handmade products, right? Now the challenge with handmade products is, it's very difficult to kind of categorize it, like you would do with traditional books, electronics, etc., right? It's just handmade products. What those guys do is, as soon as you log into the website the first time, they kind of feed you in with 5 or 6 different images, right, of various items, right? And based on the images you click, the website actually keeps a track of your profile and knows what your tastes are. It could be food items, it could be a handmade shawl, it could be a lampshade, it could be a handicraft item, it could be anything, right? And building database like this for users of thousands, they later coming up with a Facebook app. So now what you could do is, you could have a friend on Facebook and you want to gift him or her an article. You could go to his or her Etsy profile from Facebook, and you know what you have to gift him or her. And that kind of increases the kind of selling from the website, etc., right? So that's...
I would say, if you ask about the tipping point, I think that's a pretty specific question when you look at a business-to-business approach. Now, if I were a business who's operating online, I'd say I've reached my tipping point, because what's my objective? My objective is to give excellent customer service and experience, to have as many of my products displayed with great quality and service of delivery. So, am I ready to capture big data and take action? The answer would be yes, because if I'm not ready, I'm not going to give the customer the best service that they deserve, nor am I going to let my business translate into the best returns that I'm looking for. So I would say it's really specific business to business, but yes, I would say the clients within India that we work with are certainly ready to look at big data and capitalize on how best to translate it back to a better customer experience.
So how do you show them the story about big data and analytics really helping your business metrics, or really helping your performance, or really helping your profitability? I mean, they ask questions like, so how is that message getting conveyed at this point in time in India?
If I look at the recent examples of clients that we work with, it's a multi-channel operation. So you have various customer touch points where your brand is being exposed to the consumer. So it's imperative that you actually capture this strategy at various facets of that stage. So whether it's a POS machine in your brick and mortar, whether it's clicking on your traffic to get into the site, or being recommended from a friend to visit that website, these are all data capture points. And as you rightly said, the higher your vision goes, the more you're going to be capturing. And I think the more aware you need to be as to how to consolidate that data, because that's the trick. I think a lot of companies are capturing data, but they don't know what to do with that data. So if you actually fix your strategy first, what is it that I wish to achieve? It becomes much easier to find the right answer to make it meaningful. So that's a strategy that we found clients work with. First, they look at what is it that I wish to achieve, and we work backwards to find the right solution to make it work through people and technology.
The point on, we are capturing a lot of data, and that's some regular sort of statement we keep listening to, that we are measuring whatever is there. And I think all companies are attempting to measure all kinds of data. But what would you comment on right now, the quality of data that resides in with companies? And are there gaps or are there opportunities where this quality of data can take a significant leap in terms of improvement in the next 3-4 years, and what is stopping them? So any comments on the quality of data, which is an enabler?
So I think we work with US clients too, and we have this client which is a very large home site, and it's one of the larger home websites in the US. They're almost like a $600 million company there. So these guys have been running the site since the last 10 years or so. So it specifically mentioned quality of data. So I wanted to comment on that. So they have been capturing data since like 10 years, big volumes of data. They've been working on it since quite some time. But at this point of time, they're actually going through a process of scrubbing their data clean, because the data they captured across these 10 years don't seem to be making sense, because it's not well cataloged, it's not well attributized, so it's becoming very difficult for them to make sense of the data. So they're actually going through a process of scrubbing their data clean and just trying to make meaningful insights of that.
I think it's sort of a cycle. Let me give you an example. Like most of the e-commerce companies today have enough data right now. You can, let's say, I want to calculate an average bill value and want to say that what is that one item I need to add to the cart, which will increase my average bill value. You can make your data team sit on it. They will take probably 3 days and then give you the right output. But what if the same thing happens at runtime and you see that extra product coming into, coming into that cart the moment the user adds all those products to the cart? So you have achieved that, due to processing power or timing, you're able to push that average bill value using all the data sets that you had. So I think this is the sales story for people who are looking to crunch big data. But the quality of it also, when you make it, when the timing of the data is right, when you're drawing decisions on runtime, you also start getting to know that my data is not right, the quality is not right. As he said, that it took them 10 years to figure out that, okay, the data quality that we're collecting is not right. If only they had arrived at some decision points 2 years back, they would have said, okay, yeah, I'm not collecting this information. At least for the next 2 years, let me collect this information.
So the definition of good data evolves let's say, as we go along. It's a function of time.
I would say it depends on the decision, right? The decision that you're looking at will define whether your data is good or not.
So what are some other filters that are used to segregate what is a good data versus what is a bad data? What is it that the companies should not be doing in terms of data capture, and what is it that some companies should be doing in terms of data capture?
I mean, would you say there's a good data and a bad data?
There's clean data.
Yeah, so absolutely. So this comes back again, I think, to the mindset. When are you ready to actually see data as a value addition? Because I think the point is, the sooner you start to analyze, or I should say, find a methodology of capturing the data correctly, the cleaner you can keep it. And the cleaner you can keep it over time, the more actionable it becomes. So I think we get back to the mindset of understanding what data is about and how it's going to add value to my customer and my business. And that formulates the right strategy from the start. So I think all data is very valuable. It's just how clean it is that we can actually take action from it. That's really the fundamental question that we should ask ourselves.
Shantanu, do you have a definition of clean and unclean data in Amazon?
I'm sure they do. I'm not from the Amazon.com retail side of things, but just slightly digressing to your original question on this part was, what are the technological challenges and the gaps that we are seeing which is stopping customers or e-commerce shops in India kind of processing? I think it's going to change very soon. We have reached possibly, I wouldn't say tipping, but I don't know what a tipping point would be, but a stage where the technology that is required to enable you or kind of go ahead with your big data processing or analytics, right? Those are changing in the sense that it's becoming more and more easier to get you enabled on them in terms of the offerings that platforms are coming up with, right? I mean, Amazon itself, Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud computing side, is now come up with several platforms which give you big data and analytics as a service on a pay-per-use model, right? So basically, you just take your data, run them through the Hadoop set of clusters and get your output instead of kind of spending days and days finding engineers who could actually set up those and maintain those, right? Also, the way Amazon.com did it back in the days and still does it is doing it in a form of web service model, right, with Amazon Web Services. Because when you're using a platform which is high scale and a pay-per-use model, right, where you pay for servers by the hour, for example, the beauty of the platform is the cost of running 100 servers for 1 hour and the cost of running one server for 100 hours is the same, right? So that's where you kind of decide your tipping point between cost and in terms of time, right? So choosing the right platform and technology is becoming easier, and I think it's a matter of time before Indian e-commerce shops should, deep dive into the big data analysis.
One reason I was asking this question about, ecosystem and readiness of India is just to come back to where Indian retailing is today. So unlike, let's say, a US or a Europe, where 90% of e-tail happens, or any form of retail happens through a modern retail format. It can be an online portal, it can be mom and pop, brick and mortar stores, hypermarkets. In India, this percentage is only 7%. And also to top it up, there are 15 million shops in India. 90% transactions are in cash. So if I go into a US and buy a Snickers from hypermarket, it becomes a data at that point in time that gets fed in. So there's a larger ecosystem that is at play for data to get captured, which then companies use differently and differentiate. Whereas in India, when you come to think of it, these are some of these anomalies that come in. It makes the entire market play out very differently. So coming back to the question that what are some of these enabling conditions that need to fall in place for big data ecosystem to emerge in India? So, are there issues around smartphones, technology penetration, payment gateways? Is there a larger play of these things to also fall in place for big data analytics to really work at its potential?
Whether it's an offline store or an online store, as long as the skeleton of decision making is clear in the retailer's head, that whatever data I collect, I want this decision, I want to arrive at this decision making process. It's possible. So let me give you an example. A lot of offline stores don't even collect an email ID for a customer, right? Now, how do you connect whether the buy happened online or offline? Online, I'm collecting that data. But now I don't know if he went back to the offline store and purchased again. I can't do an LTV calculation because, he might have made 3 purchases in offline. So these basics need to be in place. So whether it's offline or online, you can always process it later. You can always connect it later. So I think for the whole ecosystem to develop, so whatever touch points you have, whether it's a mobile store or an online store or an offline store, you need to standardize the data sets which will make your decision happen.
I think unless you have a unified customer database, it's not going to work. That's the problem, actually.
But yeah, so I agree. I mean, you need that unification. But to say we don't have it, that's stopping us, I wouldn't say that it wouldn't be there. I again feel it comes back to the mindset. It's very individual. You can have one client who's steaming ahead and analyzing data by real time. So that's going to have a very different impact to the bottom line than somebody who's looking at that data every month. So it really comes back to the readiness, because the tools and technology, yes, we are evolving and we're going to get there to a level where you cannot even differentiate anymore. And in fact, in many instances, we're pretty much ahead. So I still say it comes back to the readiness of the business and the business owner, but that has to filter down to every facet of your business. If you're brick and mortar, your attendants at the shop floor, they need to be observant. You need to be looking at visual merchandising. You need to be looking at where is the customer flowing to. And then at the POS, what am I recording for that data? And the same goes on to your online business. You have to treat the customer as your, they are your data points. So the sooner you capture it, the easier it becomes to, again, go back to action.
Great. We can throw open this panel for discussion and for questions from the audience. First question is always difficult. Yeah, so I'll repeat this question from Manish. What are your views on making it public and providing a level playing field? So, does data have it? Second one, yeah, it's probably, I'll take the time to kind of interpret the first one. Does data have a shelf life depending on the category industry sector?
I think it does. For example, if it's a fashion data, so, or for example, let's take sales of electronics data. Shelf life of a product is like 6 months. The value of the data is still only 6 months. For a fashion website, it might be a little longer or lesser. It depends on the type of product lines you're trying to sell.
I would say yes and no. Let's say I was a retailer of a VCR 10 years back. They don't exist anymore. So I can't use it to sell any more VCRs or crunch that data to see what were their buying patterns. But yes, because maybe I can upgrade them to a DVD player or a Blu-ray player. So
I think it's also interesting to see what's the response time. Because rather than also data just having a shelf life, let's say, for example, I'm tracking a consumer who's purchasing a product and they fall out and they don't complete that purchase. If I have a call center attendant who within a matter of a minute, let's say, has called that shopper to find out the reason, my chances of converting through the use of data where I saw where they dropped out becomes much, much higher. If I leave that action for a week or even a day, it could be very too late to actually convert that data to meaningful action to bring a result. So response time also has a strong shelf life, which has to be taken pretty fast.
The first question is for you, Shantanu. The first question is where the data should be made public, just sitting on.
In a way, yes, we are moving towards it. Anyone here aware of the 1,000 Genomes project? So the 1,000 Genomes project is this unique project where involves scientists all over the world, life sciences scientists, right, who have collated DNA from about 2,700 different human samples across the world, right, and stored it on something called as storage, Amazon Cloud Storage, right. So just imagine the phenomenal kind of use cases of it in life sciences, right. People could download, and it's available for free of cost, by the way, for downloading. So you could just type it on Google, go to the storage link, download it for yourself, and then do whatever scientific analysis you could do with that, right? And it actually runs into petabytes and petabytes and petabytes of data, trust me. You can just imagine DNA samples in details of 2,700 plus human samples across the globe. So we are getting there. It's also in terms of the storage that we have done learnings from our experience in the last 18 years or so. We've come up with various storage platforms so that, for the second question, if you do have a data which has shelf life, and if you do have a storage platform which costs you, I don't know, half a cent per gigabyte of data to store, it doesn't hurt to keep it stored, archived in cold storage, even though it's not used for you. So, yeah, we are getting there. We will continue going there. So, Amazon pretty much believes in the open source philosophy. A lot of our infrastructure within uses open source, etc. So, we will keep sharing our learnings.
Thanks.
No, I don't think there's any threshold limit. It's just the way you manage it. I mean, traditionally it's supposed to be huge, right? But there's no sayings that if you have 274 terabytes of data, that's where you're a big data customer. Otherwise, below that, it's not. It's not that. It's the way you analyze the data, the way you have your sensors, like Rashmi was pointing out an extension to that. Anytime you need to collect data, store it, process it, and again store the output, right? When you go through this process, it's actually called big data. And when I say collect it, I mean collect it in semi-formatted fashion or full formatted fashion from the social media sites and out of the internet on which you don't have control, right? So anything that requires a significant process there defines as big data analytics. So. It's a part of it. It's a part of it. Big data is a broad term. Again, it's not a technology, it's a paradigm shift. It's a way you to go about doing things, which is kind of the next step from traditional business intelligence is what big data is coming. I'll give you an example and you can add to it. So looking at it real time, right? There are two ways, real time and offline. Real time would be, you know, when I was talking earlier, if you go to Yelp.com or even Google.com, and when you start typing, if you type Westin, W-E-S-T-E-N, it'll actually say that, did you mean Westin, right, the hotel? What it's basically doing is in the back end for years and years, Google has actually collected all the misspelled words ever typed on the search engine, collected it, stored in a NoSQL database, and when you're typing it, it's in real time comparing it with that database and then doing a predictive recommendation to you, right? So that's an example of real time. It doesn't really matter whether you're a startup or an SMB or enterprise, right? The use case is the same. You're basically, the idea is to control the user experience based on doing predictive recommendations to the point where you have a bit of the user's history, you're actually recommending products and catalogs based on his profile.
Hi, my name is Malika. I just want to check whether how much relevant is to have a personal detail for the person to analyze that as consumer, and how much how far you can go to get the personal details without being very irritant or getting into that space of personal consumer. How do you do that? I mean, if I have to take whether he's married, not married, what is his income, how many children, from what strata of society, to analyze it. But it's very cumbersome, I wouldn't like people asking me so many questions. So how do I get those dynamics right?
So I think the more important data points to collect are the psychographic data rather than the demographic data. The psychographic data are the ones which really help you to merchandise and take good consumer-facing decisions. But obviously, those are the most difficult to collect. And that's why you have the social graph from Facebook, etc., coming in, the data you can use from there. As coming back to the demographic data, I think it's just about finding out interesting ways of collecting those data. You can't just put away shit out there saying, okay, what's your marital status, what's your income status. I think at different points of time, you could send out an email after a certain point and say that, okay, if you're filling this, your birthday, I'm going to give you a coupon of 50 rupees or whatever. So I think you'll have to find innovative ways of collecting data.
But I think that's a really good question because it comes into that space of when am I intruding or when am I not? When am I putting my customer off or when am I actually enticing them to come forward? So what we have done with this approach, we've changed the way we capture our clients' data. So rather than having to ask 10 questions, which can be a bit prolonging and a bit cumbersome, we are tagging and understanding consumers' behavior from what they are purchasing and when. So we're shifting it around rather than to asking questions and making them answer it in that way. We are building the data by analyzing their movements, their trends, their behaviors, and then it becomes much easier to actually personalize what you're going to ask them, that it makes sense. I would like to answer this question because it makes sense to perhaps what I bought a week ago. So there is a strategy involved in taking away intrusion and not encroaching on somebody's privacy, but making even that answer or their desire to answer meaningful. There's a fine line that you have to find the right balance with.
Also, a lot of data may not be useful later. So, for example, there's enough research done saying that if you have more than 7 fields of collection on a checkout page, your conversion ratio will drop by a percent or whatever. But let's say you can still, as DJ said, that there are nicer ways of quizzes and so on, giving coupons or incentives to people to get that data collected. But you can always collect that data on a sample set, as raw as possible. Give them a 15-field checkout page and collect that data for 10 people and see what would you do with that data if you had that data for 2,000 people. So I think first level of evaluation, whether that parameter is right for me to collect, can come from a sample set, and then probably you can find nicer ways of going ahead and making it for everybody.
So for e-commerce companies, you've got various sets of data. You've got customer data, address data, vendor data, you've got product-related data. So in terms of data quality, what are the major pain points? Which particular data set forms the most challenging part for e-commerce companies to collect it and make sure that it's standardized, clean data?
That's another very good question. I would think, and do correct me, gentlemen, what you feel with this, but there are a lot of tools out there to already help you when it comes to, understanding traffic data. Where my customer is coming from, which geography, how long are they spending, which page were they enticed through, which page did they exit from. So that's pretty easy for you to manage. I think the tricky part comes in when you're understanding your customer's behavior. I think that is the area that we are finding more so today, that clients find it harder to understand or to manage and capture, going back not to intrude on the consumer space, and then take actionable steps from capturing that data. So I would say it's about consumer behavior, buying trends, buying preferences, and finding the way to then predict what your customer actually wants to buy next. That is where it's most interesting, but it can also be most challenging.
I think
If you have an open text field, you have an issue. As much as possible, do not have open text fields.
thanks a lot, delegates, for this amazing, fascinating discussion. Thanks a lot, audience, for the patient hearing. Thanks.
Thank you to our moderator and our panelists for that great session there.